Welcome back to the deep dive. We take the research, distill it down, and hopefully give you the insights you need to, well, get ahead. Today, we're tackling a really fundamental tool in product management, but one that's surprisingly tricky: the feature-based product roadmap. Okay, so our mission for you today is pretty clear. We want you to really understand what these are, obviously, but also grasp the power they have for driving clarity, and crucially, the massive strategic risks if you're not careful, if you let them turn your team into, what people call a feature factory.
Exactly. And when we talk about these roadmaps, we're really looking at a planning tool that's intensely focused on output. It's essentially a list, sometimes a very, very detailed list of specific features, specific functionalities that you plan to build and release over some defined period.
So it's like taking that big, maybe fuzzy product strategy and making it concrete. Answering that question, okay, but what are we actually building?
Precisely. It becomes that visual guide. It translates those abstract strategies into, well, actionable steps, and that focus on output. That's its defining trait. You're not just saying, oh, let's improve user engagement. No, you're listing the actual pieces, the components you believe will achieve that.
Right. Let's maybe use an example to make it clear. Say you're building, I don't know, a scheduling app like for Teams.
Yeah.
A feature-based roadmap wouldn't just say make collaboration better. It gets specific. It lists things like calendar integration via API, or maybe coworker tagging functionality and drag and drop event management. And crucially, those aren't just floating ideas. They're physically slotted into phases like Q4 development or beta launch next year, something tangible.
And that slotting, that phasing, gives it its typical format. You usually see these as, timelines, or maybe a Kanban board if that works for the team. Sometimes even a really detailed Gantt chart. And importantly, they tend to include those operational details, things like dependencies between features, who's working on what, resource allocation, and often those estimated delivery dates, which, as we'll see, can be a double-edged sword.
Okay, right. Let's unpack the good stuff first. The benefits. Why do teams, really successful teams, often choose this approach, despite the risks we're definitely going to get into? What's the appeal of focusing so tightly on features?
Well, the number one advantage, really, is immediate clarity and alignment. A list of features is pretty unambiguous, right? Everyone involved, product, engineering, marketing, sales, even leadership, they can look at that roadmap and get a clear picture. What's being built? Roughly when is it expected? And that clarity, it just naturally fosters better collaboration, makes decision-making a bit easier when everyone's looking at the same concrete plan.
And that clarity isn't just for the tech teams. Thinking about sales, marketing. A roadmap saying increase revenue 10% is fine, but kind of abstract for them. But a feature roadmap saying, okay, we're launching this new access control feature in Q3, that's something they can actually work with.
That's exactly the key operational benefit. Sales can start planning their cycles around it. They can build their go-to-market strategies. Marketing knows exactly what capabilities to message. It helps manage expectations across the board because you're being specific about deliverables and timelines. And actually, this structure, when done well, can help prevent that dreaded feature creep, because prioritization is, or should be, explicitly tied to that list.
Okay, wait, I need to push back on that a little. Because isn't feature creep sometimes caused by having a fixed feature list? Executives see the list, they demand you stick to it, even if you learn something new or a better idea comes along. How does having a list prevent creep, rather than just locking you in?
That's a really fair challenge. And honestly, it hinges entirely on how you build and maintain that roadmap. If you do it right, the feature roadmap forces you to use objective methods, we'll talk about those, to prioritize what actually delivers impact. So if a new request pops up, it doesn't just get tacked on, it has to potentially displace something already prioritized. That forces a tougher conversation, ideally based on data, not just, who shouted loudest. It makes prioritization more formal. And ultimately, if you're tying these features back to actual customer problems, maybe quantified pain points, you ensure your effort is actually going towards meaningful improvements. Things that help in the short term, but also build towards that longer term vision.
Okay, now for the juicy part, the drawbacks. This is where it gets really interesting. We've all heard the horror stories. What actually happens when a team gets too focused on just, checking off features on that list?
Well, the first big risk is exactly what you touched on, rigidity and inflexibility. Once you publish specific features with specific timelines, stakeholders almost inevitably see those as hard commitments, promises. So if the market suddenly pivots, or maybe user testing completely invalidates a feature you planned, it becomes incredibly difficult to change course without causing a lot of internal friction, maybe even a crisis of confidence. You've essentially locked the steering wheel, strategically speaking.
Right. And that rigidity, that inability to adapt, leads straight into the biggest strategic danger, becoming that feature factory. This is where the team starts measuring success purely by output. How many features did we ship this quarter? It's about quantity, velocity, not necessarily about the impact those features had on the user or on the business's bottom line.
Exactly. And the danger there is really insidious because it shifts the focus inward onto delivery speed rather than outward, onto creating actual value. And the team starts neglecting really crucial but maybe less visible long-term health factors. Specifically, things like technical debt and core infrastructure improvements. They get pushed aside.
Let's dig into technical debt for a second. For listeners maybe more on the product or business side, what does that actually look like when it piles up? What happens when you keep ignoring the foundations to build the next shiny thing?
Oh, it's like the silent killer of product scalability and speed. Neglected tech debt shows up as, well, slower performance, maybe more bugs slipping through. Security vulnerabilities can creep in, increasing risk. It makes it harder and harder to integrate new technologies or respond quickly to market changes. And really critically, it actually slows down the engineering team itself. What should be a simple feature add becomes this huge complex task because the underlying code is, well, a mess. A house of cards, like you said. You end up, running faster and faster on this treadmill, but not really going anywhere strategically. And you risk burning out your best engineers in the process. And then if you try to layer this feature-first obsession onto, say, an agile environment, it can get even worse. You end up with unrealistic expectations set by those fixed roadmaps, wasted effort on features that get changed constantly, or features that get built but then never actually shipped or used because the strategy got lost somewhere along the way.
Okay, wow. The risk is definitely clear. That feature factory sounds like a place nobody wants to work. So the big question then is, how do you get that clarity, that alignment benefit of a feature roadmap, but consciously, intentionally avoid falling into those traps, avoiding the rigidity, avoiding the tech debt spiral? Our sources actually lay out a pretty systematic, 7-step process for building one the right way.
Yeah, and the first few steps are absolutely non-negotiable if you want to avoid that factory mindset. Step 1, you absolutely must define your product vision and objectives first before you even think about specific features. What's the big picture? Are you trying to, say, reduce customer churn by 15% or capture X% of a new market segment? Every single feature later needs to trace back to these broader aims.
Makes sense. Anchor everything first.
Yeah.
Then you get into gathering and sorting. So steps 2 and 3 are gather ideas from everywhere, right? Customer feedback, market analysis, user research, internal teams. And then the really critical part, prioritize features. Because you just can't build everything. You need some objective way to decide what makes the cut. What are some of those objective methods that the sources recommend? How do you prioritize beyond just gut feeling?
Right. You need to move past just intuition. 2 frameworks really stand out in the research. First, there's the classic impact effort matrix. Simple, easy to visualize, plots features based on potential impact versus how hard they are to build. But more mature teams often use something more sophisticated, like RACE scoring.
RICE. Okay, what does that stand for again?
It's reach, impact, confidence, and effort. Reach is how many users the feature affects. Impact is, well, the expected impact on a key metric. Effort is the resources needed. But the fascinating one there is C, confidence. This forces the product manager to actually put a percentage on how certain they are that the feature will actually deliver the expected impact. Why? It's basically a mechanism to check bias. If you think a feature is high impact, but you're only, say, 40% confident it'll work as expected, that low confidence score pulls its priority way down. It keeps wishful thinking in check.
Adding confidence. This feels like a small change with a huge effect. Keeps ego out of it, maybe.
Okay, so after prioritizing, step 4 requires some real pragmatism. Resource allocation. This is where you assign teams, estimate budget, and set those rough timelines. And the sources really emphasize using broader strokes here, thinking in quarters, or maybe using that popular now, next, later structure.
Yeah, exactly. Broad strokes are key for flexibility.
But let me ask you, how realistic is that now, next, later thing? I mean, when you've got stakeholders, executives foot in the bill, they often want a date, right? They want to know, is this Q4, Q1? Doesn't just saying next create maybe more anxiety down the line?
It definitely creates a different kind of conversation, yes. But it's about managing expectations, honestly. The whole point of now, next, later is to be transparent about the inherent uncertainty in product development. You explain that now is what we're committed to, working on currently. Next is what we believe is coming up, but it's subject to change based on what we learn from now. And later is purely directional, things we're considering further out. If they absolutely insist on a hard date for something in next or later, then you must communicate the trade-offs. That date comes with huge buffers built in and a clear understanding that scope might need to be cut if unforeseen complexity arises. It forces realism. And this ties directly into the most critical part of resource allocation for avoiding that feature factory trap. You have to explicitly include budget and time buffers specifically for technical debt right from the start. Carve it out. If it's not formally budgeted for alongside the shiny new features, it simply won't get done. It'll always be the first thing cut when pressure mounts.
That feels like the whole ball game right there. Budgeting for the unshiny stuff. Okay, so the final steps are more about execution and upkeep. Choose your format, Gantt, Kanban, whatever works. Then engage stakeholders, get their buy-in, make sure they understand the priorities and the uncertainties. And finally, step 7, probably the most overlooked. Maintain the roadmap. It can't be a static document you make once a quarter. It has to be a living thing, updated regularly, accessible, and always use disclaimers about flexibility.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is how these best practices directly counteract that feature factory problem we talked about. Let's spend a moment on that rule for balancing priorities. Right, so to stop that slow slide into just churning out features while the foundation crumbles, the really successful teams, they explicitly budget their capacity across different types of work. This is like the operational secret sauce. The commonly recommended split, and it's quite specific, is something like 50% of capacity for new customer-facing features. That's the visible stuff, the value drivers. Then 25% for strategic initiatives. These might not be features users see directly, things like entering a new market, major compliance work, maybe big partnership integrations. And then a hard, protected 25% dedicated entirely to technical debt, maintenance, and infrastructure modernization. Paying down debt, refactoring, upgrading systems.
Wow, that 502-525 split, that forces a discipline, doesn't it? It basically says, look, for every 2 features we ship that the customer sees, we have to spend equivalent effort on strategic bets and making the platform stronger. That's often ignored in growth-obsessed cultures.
It makes that investment in the foundation non-negotiable, which is key. And beyond just the budget split, teams always need to tie features back to quantifiable goals. Don't just list features. List why they matter, potential revenue, user satisfaction score improvements, reduce support tickets, whatever. Use metrics. And communication is absolutely vital. Tailor the roadmap communication to the audience. Developers need the nitty-gritty technical details, dependencies, but executives or customers, they need a higher-level view focused on the benefits and outcomes, not the specific implementation details.
Right. And one last practical tip from the sources, get off the spreadsheets. Static tools just don't cut it for something this dynamic. The roadmap needs to be updated constantly and easily accessible. That means using dedicated product management software tools like Roadmaps, Productboard, Savio, there are many out there. Trying to manage this complexity in Excel or PowerPoint is just asking for it to become outdated instantly.
Which kind of brings us back full circle to the bigger picture. We've laid out how to build and manage a good feature-based roadmap, but when might it just not be the right tool for the job? You know, if the internal politics around dates are too intense, or if the need for flexibility is just paramount because the market is incredibly volatile, maybe you need a different approach. We should briefly contrast it with some key alternative. You've got outcome-based roadmaps. These focus entirely on the desired results or user scenarios you want to achieve. So instead of listing features, you might list goals like users can complete the onboarding process 50% faster, or reduce checkout abandonment by 20%. The specific features become implementation details, not the primary focus.
Okay, so focused on the why or the what result, not the how. And then there are goal-oriented roadmaps. How are they different?
Similar, but often at a slightly higher level. They prioritize broader business objectives or strategic pillars. Think things like improve customer retention or expand into the enterprise market or close key feature gaps versus competitor X. The features are definitely secondary documentation here. And finally, probably the most flexible approach are theme-based roadmaps. Here, you group work under really high-level categories or themes, like a theme might be user experience enhancements or performance and scalability. This gives maximum flexibility on the specific features within that theme, but it does require a lot more ongoing communication internally to clarify exactly what's being worked on next under that umbrella.
Okay, so lots of flavors of roadmaps. Wrapping this up then, what does this all mean for you, the listener?
I think the key takeaway from this deep dive is that the feature-based roadmap is, well, it's a powerful tool, no doubt. It offers incredible clarity on what you're building and a reasonable idea of when. But
and this is a huge but, that clarity comes at a price. It demands really rigorous quantitative management, using things like RICE scoring, and most critically, enforcing something like that 50% feature, 25% strategic, 25% tech debt split. You have to actively manage it to stop your team from just becoming an unsustainable feature factory.
Absolutely. And the right choice for any specific team or organization. It often isn't about picking one pure type. It might involve a hybrid approach, maybe using the clear deliverables of a feature roadmap for the near term, but constantly validating and anchoring those features against broader outcome-based goals for the longer term. If you don't intentionally connect those features to strategic outcomes, and if you don't protect that budget for maintenance and foundation work, you really do risk just building stuff for the sake of building stuff.
That's a perfect place to leave it. So, given that we've seen the most successful, sustainable product teams explicitly budget maybe 25% of their capacity just for technical debt and platform health, here's something for you to think about. In your own team, your own organization, how much effort really goes into just building that next shiny customer-facing feature versus how much dedicated, protected time and budget is truly allocated to strengthening the core infrastructure that everything else relies on? Think about that 25%. Is it real and protected in your world, or is it constantly getting squeezed out by the demand for the new? Something to mull over. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and share it, with others who might benefit too. To learn more about product management and digital marketing, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.